Hey everyone, I'm Faith, and today I'm going to give you 5 tips for building a deck that will outmaneuver your opponents in Star Wars Unlimited. When building a deck, it is important to have a goal in mind which you want to accomplish. Some decks are built casually to be played at the kitchen table, while others are built around a theme of characters or to recreate cinematic moments. Some decks are created to get at the local or the international level, and others are created with budgetary restraints in mind. While there are a variety of occasions one may be building a deck, this video is going to focus on building competitive decks. Another consideration when deck building is the format and the different restrictions that might exist. This video will mainly cover decks for the Premier format and will not be focused on any particular playstyle of control, aggro, mid-range, or combo, but rather be more general deck building tips. Since these different deck styles each require specific advice, comment below your deck list and the area you want it to improve for us to give more individualized feedback. If you want more tips for Star Wars Unlimited, check out our resourcing and action sequencing video and hit that like button to let us know you want more videos like this. Our number 5 tip is making your deck more efficient by using the limits allowed. In Unlimited, these limits are found in deck size and number of copies of a card. In the Premier format, the deck limit size is 50 cards. It is important to keep your deck to this size because it will allow you to draw the cards you included more often, which will make your gameplay experience more consistent. It can be tempting to put in all your favorite or good cards, and it can be difficult to make cuts on some of the cards that you have come to enjoy playing. But doing so and getting down to 50 cards will make your deck better. It is for a simpler reason that you will want to include multiple copies of any particular card, which in Star Wars Unlimited, the maximum limit is 3, in your deck, because it means that the cards which you have deemed are good enough to be included will show up more often because you have multiple chances at drawing any of the copies. Since the deck limit is 50 cards, and you can have 3 copies of any card in particular, when you are starting off, you should 16 cards that you run 3 copies of, and 1 card you run 2 copies of, so you can have the most consistent deck possible to test which cards are worth keeping, and then, as you get more experience, you can include spicy one-offs or pre-board for meta expectations. Moving on to number 4, we have include enough first turn plays. In Star Wars Unlimited, you start at 2 resources, and so first turn plays will generally be considered cards which cost 1 or 2 resources to play. On your first turn, you are generally going to want to play a unit which will either set the pace of the game by being able to deal effective damage to your opponent's base, or you are going to want to play a unit which can help set up your later units and deal effectively with what your opponent plays. There are also some unit cards which cost 1 or 2, which would not be considered good first turn plays. Snowtrooper Lieutenant is an example of this because, while you could play it on your first turn, a 2/2 unit is understated for 2 resources, and where its value comes from is its when played effect, which lets you attack with a unit and potentially give it a buff. Since this effect would not do anything because you would not have another unit on the board to target, because this is your first action of the game, you would be putting yourself behind to start the game. This small opening to your opponent could give them enough of an advantage, which, if built on correctly, could make coming back very difficult. It is for this reason that we recommend to put at least 9 good turn 1 plays, and unless you are playing an aggro deck, you don't need to include more than 12 good turn 1 plays. As you get more experience with your deck, you can also consider getting more creative with your turn 1 plays. And, with your mulligans, since you get a free mulligan, if you include 10 turn 1 plays in your deck, you have about a 94% chance to draw at least 1 on the first turn, which, as far as TCGs are concerned, are good odds and will make sure that you don't get caught on the back foot. Number 3 on our list is to have a plan for the space arena. There are many interesting units in Star Wars Unlimited to consider when building a deck, and it can be easy to overlook the space arena. In general, there are less space units in the first set, and they tend to be slightly weaker than their ground counterparts. However, since one of the 2 play spaces are dedicated to this arena, it is important to have a game plan to deal with your opponents in that arena. For matchups where you are the aggressive deck, The Space Arena is a great place to put units like Green Squadron A Wing to avoid early units which can effectively deal with A Wing, and to avoid many of the Sentinel units from your opponent. For matches where you are the control deck, it will be important to have units of your own, events, or upgrades in order to deal with or slow down your opponent's space plan. Event cards, like Open Fire, are beneficial because they can target units in either arena, unlike Force Choke. And so, though it deals less damage and costs more, its additional flexibility increases its viability in deck construction. Between combat focused space units and events, your deck should have at least 10 ways to answer and interact with the space arena. In a live stream from FFG, one of the designers is quoted as saying, "Eat your vegetables and put space units in your deck," which highlights the importance of having an effective answer to this arena. Next, at number 2, we have make sure your deck has the proper cost curve. In trading card games, cost curve refers to the number of cards in your deck which cost a certain amount of resources. Generally, you will want more early game plays in your deck than late game cards, though the exact ratio will depend on the playstyle of your deck. While late game cards are generally stronger than early game cards, the extra power level the late game cards provide will not be useful if your base is destroyed before they are able to be played. Therefore, you need cards in the early game to help set the pace for your opponent, and then your mid game to either finish off your opponent or, as the control player, use the mid game to hold off the initial push in order that you are able to play your late game finishing cards. Once you have sorted your cards out by cost, you should be able to see a curve as the number of cards at each cost value decreases as the resource cost for the cards increases. A general rough breakdown for this could look something like 15 1 or 2 cost cards, 18 3 or 4 cost cards, 12 5 or 6 cost cards, and then 5 7 or more cost cards. Obviously, this will look different for different playstyles, but generally, the most number of cards in your deck should cost either 2 or 3 resources. One important factor when building your deck and examining its cost curve is to consider your leader's ability. When leaders have abilities which cost resources, it may be worth playing a card whose cost is less than the maximum number of resources you have available. A great example of this is Luke Skywalker, Faithful Friend. As long as he is not deployed, you can pay 1 resource and exhaust Luke to give a shield token to a heroism unit that you played this turn. Normally, if you have 4 resources available to use and you have Yoda and Kanan in your hand, it would almost always be better to play Kanan on curve because he is the better unit to play and uses all your resources. However, with Luke as your leader, while it may be better to play Kanan sometimes, other times it will be better to play the Yoda, and then, as your next action, use Luke's ability to give Yoda the shield token. Doing this still uses up all your resources, and instead of having the straight up stronger unit, you now have a less powerful unit that has an additional shield upgrade. Making sure you have the correct number of cards at different cost levels will ensure that you can play effective cards at every stage in the game. Finally, our number 1 tip for building a better deck is to playtest, playtest, and playtest. While playing around an interaction or a leader ability might seem like a good idea on paper, it is important to test your deck against other players to see how the deck interacts against different board states and to see how your opponents respond to your plays. After you playtest your deck enough and get a better understanding of the strengths and limitations of the cards in your deck and the different play angles, you can start breaking some of the conventional deck building rules in order to gain an edge. Since Star Wars Unlimited is a leader based game, you will want to include the proper balance between generally good cards and cards which work well with your leader. The more you playtest, the more you will be able to determine which of these categories a card belongs in, and which card they may be able to be replaced with. After playtesting a few times, if you find that you are always resourcing a certain card, or it's in your hand and you're not playing it, you should consider finding a different card to replace it with. While you are playtesting, it may be helpful to bring a paper and pen and write down which card you would rather this card be that is not already in your deck. If you write down the same card more than once, you should consider adding that card and playtesting some more. Ultimately, the point of playtesting is to get your deck to the point where it effectively accomplishes the goal you set out to achieve. Proper building your deck is an important first step to outmaneuvering your opponents. The next step is learning how to properly pilot the deck. Check out our other videos on YouTube for more tips on resourcing, action sequencing, and more, as well as our Discord channel listed below. Comment below which area of Star Wars Unlimited you would like us to do for our next tip video, and we will see you next time on Outmaneuver.